In my last video, I showed you how I processed this awesome sunset over this canyon. And in this video, we're going to do something similar. We're going to process this stormy sunset over this little tiny mountain house. And we're going to go from this to this. And it's actually not really that difficult to do at all. So let's hit that magic button and just wipe the whole slate clean, and boom, all those settings are gone, and I'm going to show you how to get them back. It's really important to note the settings I was using when I took this shot here. I was using my good old Nikon D850, a 20mm 1.8 Nikon lens, shooting at ISO 64. That gave me a wide dynamic range to capture all the information in this shot. I was shooting at f11 and 1/30th of a second. That helped me get the exposure I wanted to get all the detail in this shot. The first step's going to be the easiest. Coming down here to the optics, I'm going to click remove chromatic aberrations, and I'm going to click enable lens corrections. I don't know if you noticed, but when you enable the lens corrections, it brightened up this little foreground strip here, right there. So I'm going to turn it off and pay attention. I'm going to turn it back on. So this lens vignettes right around that area, and by enabling lens corrections, it removes the vignetting in this area of the shot, and that's what I want for this shot. When I first found this location, this little house was my subject of interest, but then this huge storm cloud moved in, and the storm really kind of took over the entire scene. It was really dramatic. So I'm going to work on this sky here to bring it back to what it looked like when I was there. It was kind of menacing, and I'm going to use this linear gradient tool to do that. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this, get the linear gradient tool, and I'm going to drag from the top down right around here. It looks good. Maybe make a couple of adjustments. And this is really just going to have an impact on my sky. And remember, this top line from here all the way up is where the effect is going to be the most. And then from this line down, it's just going to gradually fade. So let me move it just a little bit more. Yeah, that's probably good. And this sky had a little bit of orange in it that I'm not seeing here. So I'm just going to move the temperature a little bit to the warm side and bring back some of that orange color that was in the sky. That's not too bad. It looks pretty good. And then there's also some missing contrast here. If you drag it all the way to the right, you can see what I mean. And that's a little too much. So I'm going to drag it back down just a hair. And then the highlights, they look a little bright over here. So I'm going to drag that all the way down and then bring it back up a little bit, right around to about that area. It looks pretty good. And then maybe... that looks better. And maybe shadows, just a hair up on the shadows. Yeah, it probably doesn't even really need it. But this is where you're going to have the biggest impact here with clarity and dehaze. And if you see, if I drag this clarity all the way to the right, it really makes those clouds pop. But that's not really what they look like. And I'd like them to be a little bit softer. So I'm going to come back down with this a little bit. That looks better. And this dehaze, if you drag it all the way to the right, it's just going to wreck it and make it really, really dark. That's way too much. I'm going to bring it back down a little bit. That's a little better. Yeah, that's what it looked like when I was there. It was actually kind of frightening. And that really, really brings it out really well. All right, let's move on to the next part of this. I'm going to go over here into the detail tab and just add a little bit of sharpening just to the edges. I don't want to sharpen the entire image, so I'm going to hold down Alt, and I'm going to drag this slider to the right. And everything that's black will not have any sharpening. Everything that's white will. So I've just got the edges here. That looks pretty good. And I'm not going to apply any noise reduction just yet. I'll save that for the last step of this image. All right, in this next part, let's actually move up here into the light or the exposure setting. And I'm not going to really do all that much in this one. I do want to bring back some of this foreground. Maybe play with the contrast a little bit. Probably not necessary. But I really want to bring back the shadows in this foreground. So I'm just going to drag the shadows all the way up. And that's a little too much. So I'm just going to slowly drag them back down. Yeah, that looks really good. And that's all I'm going to do in this section. All right, let's see where all the color lives in this shot. I'm going to move over to the color section here. I'm not going to do anything with the temperature, but I am going to play with the vibrance here a little bit. I'm going to just crank it all the way up. And it just really hideous looking. So I'm going to drag it back down until it looks pretty good. Right around there somewhere. That looks good. I'm going to do the same exact technique with the saturation. Just drag it all the way up. And that's way too much. So I'm going to bring it down just a little bit. That's good. Now let's see where some of these individual colors might live in this shot. I can already see a lot of orange and a lot of yellow. It looks a little too much. So I'm just going to turn the saturation down a little bit on this orange. That's pretty good. But at the same time, I'm going to brighten up all the orange areas. I'm going to drag it all the way to the right. You can see how it really brightens it up, but that's too much. So I'm going to bring it back down just a little bit, about like that. Then I'm going to do the same thing with the yellow. I can see there's too much, so I'm going to drag the yellow saturation down just a little bit. And I'm going to brighten up some of this yellow in the foreground. Yeah, that's too much. So I'm going to bring it right around here. That looks pretty good. And then I can really see like the blue up here in the sky. Looks a little too saturated. So I'm going to drag the saturation on this blue down just a little bit. There, that looks better. And then I'm going to adjust the luminance as well to just darken it just a little bit. And there's some green here in this foreground. I'm going to see if I can get some of that back right over there on the left. That's pretty good. I think that does it for the color on this shot. This is looking pretty good. We're almost done, but I want to do one more thing to this sun here. See if I can get it a little bit under control. I'm going to use a radial gradient to really just alter this area just a little bit. So I'm going to click on this, and I'm going to right click here to reset all these sliders. And then I'm just going to click and drag outwards to draw this radial gradient over the sun right here. It's always a little tricky getting it just right. And it probably doesn't have to be this exact, but there we go. And I'm just going to move it over right on top of the sun. Make a couple little adjustments to it. Make sure it fits over. Yep, that looks pretty good. And it's important to note that this one is inverted. So, and the feather is at 89. So when you invert it, it will only affect the center of this, and it will be the strongest in the middle and then feather its way out. And that's what I've chosen here. So let's make a few changes to this gradient and see how see if we can get the sun a little bit more under control. So I'm going to come up here, maybe add a little bit of warmth to it, just a little bit of, because it is the sun. It should be kind of an orange color. That's kind of how it was. And then I'm going to come in here, maybe just a little bit of exposure up, although it's probably might not be necessary. And let's drag the highlights down a little bit. That can bring down some of the light on that spot right there. Drag it down and up, see how it looks. That's pretty good. Yeah, right about there we go. Darkened it a little bit, kind of keeps it under control. And then we're going to go into a little bit of saturation just to get a little bit more orange there in the center. That looks really good. Added some more color to it. And I think that's it for this radial gradient. So let's do one more thing. Let's go over here into detail, and we're going to add just a little bit of noise reduction, not too much. Because some of these things might have introduced noise when we brought some of the shadows and stuff up. That should be good. And it's really interesting. I can see some dust spots in this image, and apparently I've got some dust on the sensor of my new D850. Good old Colorado. Can always count on plenty of dust. There's another spot there. So I'm going to actually fix those in Photoshop, and I'm going to show you how to do that now. I'm going to go ahead and export this picture out, and then we'll go over to Photoshop and fix that. All right, here we are in Photoshop, and you can see the dust spot here. There's a couple of other ones. So I'm just going to go ahead and zoom in on this to get close up to this little dust spot. And then I'm going to move over here to the spot healing brush. Go ahead and click on that. And it's already about the right size. So I'm just going to click here and bloop, that spot is gone. I'm going to zoom back out. See if I can find these other ones that I saw. There's one right there. Same thing. Just going to pick that spot healing brush and click right on the spot, and bloop, it's gone. You know, Colorado is great for taking pictures, but it's so dry. And whenever you change the lens out here, you have the chance of introducing dust because it's pretty much everywhere. And I see quite a few more dust spots here. I'm going to go ahead and get rid of them. Get rid of this one and get rid of this one. And there's another one there, but I think I'm okay with it. And there you go. I'm done. And it's that easy to get rid of dust in Photoshop. Looks like I might need to clean my D850 sensor, huh? Thanks so much for watching and sticking around until the end. If you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and click that subscribe button. Check out my workshops that I offer and the books I offer on my website. And of course, there's always more videos right around the corner.